Some people wait for success. Others wait for forgiveness. But every Friday at exactly 6 o'clock, a single father named Ethan Walker sat at the same corner table and waited for someone who had not walked through the door in 7 years. At Willow and Pine Grill, no one needed to ask where he wanted to sit. Table 12 stood beside the wide front window, where the evening sun stretched across the hardwood floor and turned the glass amber. Ethan arrived in the same faded brown jacket, greeted the hostess by name, and placed an old photograph beside his water glass. Then he ordered 2 dinners, 1 grilled salmon with mashed potatoes, 1 chicken pot pie with vegetables, 2 iced teas, 1 slice of warm apple pie with 2 forks. He ate the salmon. The pot pie remained untouched. At 7 o'clock, he asked for both meals to be packed, left a generous tip, straightened the chair across from him, and carried the second dinner to a nearby shelter on his way home. Customers invented explanations. Some thought he had been abandoned. Others believed grief had trapped him in the past. The employees knew only that he never invited pity and never wasted the food. They also knew that he remembered birthdays, graduations, sick parents, and the names of children he had met only once. His silence did not feel empty. It felt like a promise being kept without an audience. Across Portland, Claire Montgomery spent her Fridays in rooms where every chair was occupied and no one truly knew her. At 37, she led Montgomery Hospitality, the company her father had built from one neighborhood restaurant into a regional chain. Investors praised her discipline. Business magazines admired her ability to make difficult decisions. Her calendar was full months in advance. Yet most evenings ended with Claire eating something cold over her kitchen counter while answering messages no one would remember a week later. On that Friday, she canceled a private dinner, left her navy suit jacket in the car, and visited Willow and Pine without announcing an inspection. She wanted to see the restaurant as an ordinary customer saw it, not through sales reports and carefully prepared presentations. The manager recognized her at once, but followed her small gesture, asking him not to make a scene. Claire noticed the worn floor near the entrance, the old piano in need of repair, and a dining room that was only half full. She also noticed how warmly the employees greeted returning families. Willow and Pine had been losing money for several quarters. A redevelopment proposal was already waiting for her final review. The finance team wanted to demolish the aging building and replace it with a larger, faster concept expected to raise annual revenue by 38%. On paper, the recommendation was obvious. Standing in the dining room, Claire was no longer certain. Then she saw Ethan at table 12. He was not reading or looking at his telephone. He watched the front door with patient attention while steam slowly disappeared from the untouched pot pie. Claire asked the waitress, "Is someone joining him?" "No, ma'am," the young woman answered. "He comes every Friday, but no one has joined him for years." "Then why does he order for 2? The waitress glanced toward Ethan. "We stopped guessing. He tells us the second meal still has somewhere important to go." Before the hour ended, Claire would learn where it went, and that answer would make the demolition file in her bag impossible to ignore. Claire should have continued her inspection. Instead, she stood near the host station and watched Ethan ask another server whether her son had made the baseball team. The woman brightened as she said yes. A little girl at a nearby table dropped a crayon, and Ethan picked it up before her father noticed. When he heard that it was her birthday, he wished her a year filled with brave adventures. Within seconds, the child was smiling. Ethan returned his gaze to the entrance, as though kindness required no recognition. At 6:55, Claire made a decision that surprised her. She ordered a bowl of soup, carried her sparkling water across the dining room, and stopped beside table 12. 2 chairs stood at the small table. A third rested against the wall nearby. "Would you mind some company?" she asked. Ethan looked at the place sitting across from him, then pulled the spare chair to the side of the table. "Company is welcome," he said. "That seat is reserved, but this one has been waiting all evening." Claire sat down, more curious than before. For several minutes they spoke about the rain, the restaurant, and the old piano near the entrance. Ethan had an easy sense of humor that appeared when she least expected it. He did not ask what she did for a living. He asked whether she preferred mountains or the ocean, what book she had loved as a child, and whether the soup needed more pepper. By the time her bowl arrived, Claire realized he had made her feel less like a stranger without asking a single question about status. Her attention returned to the untouched dinner. "May I ask you something personal?" "You may ask," Ethan said. "I cannot promise a good answer." "Who are you waiting for?" The sounds of the dining room seemed to recede. Ethan looked toward the door once more, then rested his hand beside the old photograph. His expression held sadness, but it also held peace. "I am keeping a place for my wife," he said, "and a promise to my daughter." Claire glanced at the photograph, but did not reach for it. "Is your wife coming tonight?" "No," Ethan answered. "Hannah died 7 years ago." Claire immediately wished she could take back the question. "I am sorry." "Thank you. But you do not need to apologize for asking. Remembering her is not painful in the way people assume. Pretending she never existed would hurt much more." He turned the photograph so Claire could see it. A younger Ethan stood beneath the same restaurant window beside a woman with chestnut hair. A laughing little girl sat on his shoulders. The picture had been taken on Lily's 7th birthday, 1 year before Hannah died. "Hannah loved this table," Ethan said. She said the window reminded her that every person passing outside carried a story we would never know. "We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries here. When she became ill, she could not always leave the house, so every Friday I described the restaurant to her. She wanted to know whether the flowers were still outside and whether the piano player still wore his old cowboy hat." He paused, but his voice remained steady. "During her last week, she told me love should not disappear just because someone could no longer sit across the table. After she died, Lily was 8. She asked how her mother would find us if heaven ever allowed visitors. I told her we would be here every Friday, at the place holding our happiest memories. And you have come for 7 years?" Lily and I came together at first. As she grew older, school and volunteer work became important to her. I told her that keeping a promise should never prevent her from building a life. Now she joins me when she can. I still come every week. Claire looked at the second meal. "Does Hannah order chicken pot pie?" Ethan smiled. She did. She also hated seeing food wasted. After dinner, I take it to the Hawthorne shelter. Hannah volunteered there before she became sick. The empty chair is for memory. The meal is for someone who needs it. That arrangement would have pleased her. Claire had entered the restaurant thinking the ritual was evidence of a man unable to move forward. She now understood that Ethan had turned grief into service. He had raised his daughter, kept working, and learned to laugh again. He was not waiting for the past to return. He was making certain love continued to have consequences in the present. "Do people tell you it is time to move on?" she asked. "Sometimes. They mean well." Ethan folded his napkin beside his plate. "But moving forward and forgetting are not the same thing. I have moved forward. I simply refuse to leave gratitude behind." Claire lowered her eyes to her soup. She had spent years measuring performance, growth, and return on investment. Nothing in her reports had taught her how to measure a promise that fed a stranger every Friday. They continued talking after the plates had grown cold. Claire told him that she had been raised on her grandparents' small farm outside Salem and once dreamed of writing travel essays. Ethan told her he repaired heating systems for public schools and knew every building by the sounds its pipes made in winter. She laughed more than she expected. When a server addressed Claire as Miss Montgomery, Ethan noticed the manager watching from a respectful distance, but he did not comment. Before leaving, Ethan packed the pot pie, placed the apple pie beside it, and straightened the reserved chair. "I have probably taken too much of your evening," he said. Claire shook her head. "I think you may have given part of it back to me." At the entrance, the hostess called, "See you next Friday, Mr. Walker." "You certainly will," Ethan replied. Claire watched him disappear into the Oregon rain. The redevelopment proposal felt heavier in her bag than it had that afternoon. By Monday morning, Table 12 would no longer be the only promise in danger. Ethan delivered the sealed meals to the Hawthorne shelter, where Marcus checked the labels and placed them in the kitchen. Ethan never asked who received Hannah's dinner. A person needing food did not owe him a role in the ritual. At home, Lily looked up from a stack of library books. Did they take everything? Including the pie. Mom would have hidden a piece for breakfast. Ethan told her about Claire. Lily listened until he finished, then asked the question he had avoided asking himself. Do you hope she comes back? Yes, he admitted. Good. Enjoying someone does not break a promise. The answer followed him to bed. He had taught Lily that remembering Hannah did not require permanent sadness, yet he had never tested whether the rule also applied to him. Across town, Claire entered an apartment designed beautifully for a life she rarely occupied. She saw 3 prepared meals in the refrigerator, closed the door, and opened her calendar. An investor dinner occupied the next Friday at 6. She moved it to lunch. One protected hour could not rebuild a personal life, but it could prove that work no longer owned every available space. The following week, Claire tried to return to her usual rhythm. Meetings began before sunrise. Presentations filled her screen. During a financial review, the chief financial officer described Willow and Pine as an underperforming asset occupying valuable land. The phrase bothered her. She pictured the birthday girl with her crayon, the server talking about her son's baseball team, and the second dinner being carried to a shelter. Still, Claire knew emotion alone could not justify preserving a restaurant that continued losing money. Saving it without a plan would only delay its closure and put more jobs at risk. She asked her team for information they had never collected. How many customers returned each month? How many events had families celebrated there? How much food did the restaurant donate? What did local residents value about the building? She also requested a renovation estimate, a smaller menu analysis, and a plan for hosting community events. Her executives were surprised, but they produced the research. The results challenged the original recommendation. Willow and Pine had low weekday traffic, but unusually loyal weekend customers. It spent too much on oversized menu and outdated equipment. Its online presence was nearly non-existent. The building was old, but it was one of the company's last original locations and had served the neighborhood for 42 years. Replacing it might create short-term growth, yet restoring it could strengthen the identity of the entire company. Claire asked for more than data. Over the next several days, she met employees in the dining room before opening and listened without the manager present. The morning cook explained that the broad menu forced the kitchen to stock ingredients customers rarely ordered. A server suggested an early family dinner on weekdays, when nearby parents needed affordable meals before evening activities. The pianist offered to organize local music nights if the instrument could be repaired. None of their ideas had reached corporate headquarters because the annual employee survey allowed ratings but little space for proposals. Claire also invited neighborhood residents to a listening session. She expected nostalgia. She heard practical concerns. Older customers needed a safer entrance ramp. Parents wanted smaller portions for children rather than expensive full meals. A teacher proposed student art displays. The Hawthorne shelter asked whether surplus food could be donated through a consistent system instead of depending on individual employees. Ethan did not attend, and Claire was relieved. She wanted the evidence to stand without his story carrying the entire case. One woman, named Rosa, brought a photograph of her parents celebrating their engagement at Willow and Pine in 1987. She also brought a recent receipt from a competing restaurant. "I love this place," Rosa said, "but love does not make me wait 50 minutes on a Tuesday. If you save it, make it work." The honesty clarified Claire's responsibility. Preserving the restaurant could not mean freezing every weakness beside every memory. Some elements deserve protection. The window, the piano, the original wood, and the sense that employees knew their guests. Other elements needed to change because affection had allowed inefficiency to become tradition. Her father visited the office after hearing rumors that she might oppose redevelopment. Richard Montgomery had retired 6 years earlier, but remained a large shareholder. Age had softened his voice without reducing its authority. "You are risking an easy return for a difficult experiment," he said. "Yes. Because of one customer? Because one customer made me look closely. The numbers I found after looking are the reason." Richard studied the preservation plan. "Your grandfather opened that location. He nearly closed it twice. The building was never sacred to him. Serving the neighborhood was. Then renovation is consistent with what he built. If it serves people better. If you keep it only because losing it would feel cruel, you will eventually lose it anyway. Claire understood that he was not discouraging her. He was removing sentiment as an excuse for weak execution. Claire did not cancel the redevelopment. Not yet. She needed to know whether the place could become sustainable rather than merely sentimental. The next Friday, a notice reached the dining room before her decision did. Friday arrived, and she reached table 12 at 6 o'clock. Ethan had already ordered his salmon and Hannah's pot pie. A third place had been set at the side. "You came back," he said, failing to hide his pleasure. "You sound surprised." "Hopeful," he corrected. "Surprise is what happens afterward." Claire sat down and ordered grilled vegetables with bread. Their conversation resumed with none of the awkwardness she had expected. Ethan asked about the travel essays she had never written. Claire asked whether every heating system truly had a different personality. He described one elementary school boiler as an elderly opera singer who complained before performing. She laughed loudly enough to make the hostess glance over and smile. At 6:40, a teenage girl hurried through the entrance wearing a blue library volunteer shirt and carrying a backpack filled with books. Her blonde hair was tied in a loose ponytail. Ethan stood before she reached the table. "Sorry I am late, Dad," she said as she hugged him. A child refused to leave until we found the final book about a dragon detective. It became a community emergency. Ethan introduced her. "Claire, this is my daughter, Lily." Lily offered her hand. "You are the woman who asks thoughtful questions." Claire looked at Ethan. "You talked about me?" "Only enough to make you sound mysterious," he said. "He talked about you all week," Lily corrected. Ethan looked embarrassed, and Claire enjoyed the rare sight. Lily took the chair beside her father, leaving Hannah's place untouched. The three shared apple pie, and Lily described volunteering at the library, applying to a summer writing program, and trying to convince her father that his jacket had earned retirement. "The jacket still works," Ethan protested. "So does the library's typewriter from 1974. That does not mean we should take it to dinner." Claire laughed until tears touched the corners of her eyes. For years, she had built restaurants where families gathered while quietly forgetting how it felt to belong at a table herself. The warmth of the evening changed when the manager approached with a printed notice in his hand. He looked at Claire, waiting for direction. She gave a small nod. The proposal was not final, but company policy required employees to receive warning that the property was under review. He gathered the staff near the host station and explained that Willow and Pine might close within 2 months. The room became still. A server covered her mouth. The hostess looked toward table 12 before lowering her eyes. Ethan read the concern on Claire's face. "You already knew," he said after the manager walked away. It was not an accusation. That made answering more difficult. "Yes," Claire said. "The company is considering replacing this restaurant." Lily glanced between them. "How would you know what the company is considering?" Claire took a breath. She had wanted Ethan to know her without a title, but withholding the truth any longer would become deception. "My full name is Claire Montgomery. I run Montgomery Hospitality. Willow and Pine belongs to my company." Lily's eyes widened. Ethan remained quiet for a moment, then nodded as if a suspicion had been confirmed. "You knew?" Claire asked. "I knew you mattered to the people here," he said. "The manager watched you the way my school principals watched the superintendent. I assumed you would tell me when you were ready. Are you angry that I did not tell you?" "No. You sat with me as Claire. That was enough." His answer offered no escape from the larger truth. Claire explained the declining revenue, the redevelopment forecast, and the jobs that depended on a responsible decision. She did not promise to save the restaurant. She promised only that she would examine every possible alternative before choosing. Ethan looked toward the window. "I would be sad to lose this place," he said, "but memories do not live inside bricks. If the building goes, Hannah will still have been here. Lily will still remember. You are making this easier for me when you have every reason not to." "No," Ethan said. "I am trusting you to make it matter. There is a difference." Lily reached across the table and rested her hand on his. "Mom used to say home was wherever love kept showing up. Ethan smiled at his daughter. She did. Usually when I complained about fixing something. Claire looked around the dining room. Preserving the building would not be enough. If Willow and Pine survived, it needed to serve the living as faithfully as it protected the past. News of the possible closure spread through the neighborhood before the weekend ended. Customers began posting memories online, and reservations increased. For several days, Claire refused to treat the temporary attention as proof that the restaurant could survive. Curiosity after bad news was not the same as sustainable demand. She asked the team to record which visitors returned after the first week and what brought them back. Ethan continued his Friday routine. He did not organize a campaign or ask Claire for favors. When regular customers approached him because they had heard about Hannah's table, he redirected the conversation toward the employees whose jobs were at risk. "If the place matters to you, come for lunch next month too," he told one family. A farewell crowd will not keep the doors open. Lily created an online forum where residents could submit photographs and short memories for the history wall. She asked permission before posting any story and allowed families to keep names private. Within a week, more than 200 entries arrived. Some were emotional, but many contained useful information. Customers missed the old Sunday breakfast menu. Parents wanted a place where teenagers could complete homework after school. Local groups needed an affordable room for meetings. Claire hired Lily for a temporary youth consulting assignment through the company's standard student program. The payment was modest, the hours were limited, and another employee supervised her work, so the arrangement did not depend on Claire's personal relationship with Ethan. Lily used part of her first check to buy a protective sleeve for the old family photograph. "Mom has survived 7 years in Dad's jacket," she told Claire. "She deserves professional storage." The project gave Claire and Lily time together without Ethan guiding every conversation. Lily asked why Claire had hidden her title. Claire admitted that she wanted one evening when her value was not measured by her position. "Dad would have treated you the same," Lily said. "I know that now. I did not know it then. Most people learn after they make the mistake. The important part is whether they learn the useful thing." Claire wondered how much of Hannah lived in the girl's way of making compassion sound practical. By then, the board packet was complete. One vote would decide whether those memories had a future address. On Monday, Claire presented a new proposal to the board. The chief financial officer began with the 38% revenue projection for the replacement concept. Claire allowed him to finish. Then she showed the customer research, renovation costs, donation records, and a 3-year plan for transforming Willow and Pine into the company's heritage location. The plan reduced the menu, replaced inefficient kitchen equipment, added weekday community programs, partnered with nearby schools, and created a formal food donation schedule with a Hawthorne shelter. A small event room would host anniversaries, reunions, and local meetings. The company would share stories from the restaurant's 42-year history in its marketing, strengthening the brand across every location. The projected first-year profit was modest, but the long-term value was credible. "This is not charity," Claire told the board. "It is a better understanding of what we sell. Food brings people through the door. Memory gives them a reason to return." One director asked whether a single customer story had influenced her judgment. "Yes," Claire answered. "It made me investigate what our reports were failing to measure. The decision I am presenting is supported by the evidence that investigation uncovered. Leadership should not ignore numbers, but it should question whether we are counting the right things." After 2 hours of debate, the board approved a 1-year preservation plan with clear financial goals. If the restaurant failed to reach them, redevelopment would return for consideration. Claire accepted the condition. A second chance needed accountability if it was going to last. The celebration lasted less than a day. By sunrise, engineers had found a problem large enough to threaten the entire plan. Approval solved only the first problem. During the initial inspection, engineers discovered corrosion beneath part of the kitchen floor. Repairing it would add 3 weeks and nearly $100,000 to the project. The chief financial officer called Claire before sunrise. "This is the point where disciplined leaders..." "Stop," he said. The board approved a limit. Claire agreed. She refused to hide the cost inside another budget. Instead, she returned to the renovation team and reduced cosmetic work that had no effect on safety or service. Expensive decorative fixtures were removed from the plan. Local craftspeople offered fair rates, but Claire rejected unpaid labor from anyone whose livelihood depended on the work. Community support should not become an excuse for a profitable company to avoid paying people. The revised budget remained slightly above the approved amount. Claire presented the change to the board rather than proceeding without consent. She accepted a smaller executive performance bonus if the pilot missed its first-year target, demonstrating confidence without asking employees to bear the risk. The board approved the amendment by one vote. Construction created additional problems. A week of heavy rain delayed exterior work. The temporary entrance confused older guests. Online reviews complained about noise, even though the restaurant had warned customers. Claire spent 2 evenings at the host station explaining the schedule and helping direct people to accessible parking. Several guests recognized her from business magazines. Others assumed she was a new manager. She treated both groups the same. Ethan volunteered to inspect a troublesome heating vent, but Claire insisted the restaurant use a licensed contractor and pay the invoice. He respected the boundary. Instead, he helped assemble photograph frames at Lily's request in their garage. Their home filled with images of strangers celebrating decades of ordinary milestones. One photograph showed a soldier returning from deployment. Another showed 2 women cutting a wedding cake after waiting years for the law to recognize their marriage. A third showed a dishwasher receiving his high school equivalency certificate while the entire staff applauded. Ethan understood why Claire had begun calling the restaurant a memory business. He also understood her father's warning. The photographs mattered only if future families could afford to create new ones there. The team introduced a smaller menu during the renovation. Prices were adjusted carefully, with 3 complete meals kept affordable. Surplus ingredients fell sharply. Weekday service became faster. The family dinner attracted parents, while the repaired piano brought local musicians on Thursdays. The early numbers were encouraging, but Claire refused to announce victory before the pattern lasted. Renovations began 3 weeks later while the restaurant operated on a reduced schedule. Local carpenters restored the original floor. The piano was repaired instead of replaced. New windows improved energy efficiency without changing the view. A digital reservation system brought younger customers through the door, while photographs donated by neighborhood families covered one wall. Each picture showed a birthday, an engagement, a retirement dinner, or a reunion that had taken place at Willow and Pine. Claire asked Ethan and Lily for permission to include their family photograph. Ethan agreed on one condition. The display could not present him as a grieving widower waiting for a miracle. It had to mention the weekly meal donated in Hannah's honor. Her life mattered more than the way it ended, he said. Claire wrote the caption herself. Hannah Walker believed a shared meal could keep love moving forward. Her family continues that belief every Friday. During construction, Claire and Ethan kept meeting at table 12 whenever it was available. Their friendship grew through ordinary moments rather than dramatic declarations. He helped her replace a leaking pipe at her farmhouse after she insisted she could handle alone. She helped Lily revise an application essay without rewriting the girl's voice. Ethan persuaded Claire to take one Saturday away from work and hike along the Columbia River Gorge. Claire persuaded him to buy a new jacket, although he continued wearing the old one whenever rain threatened. They spoke about Hannah without discomfort. Claire never tried to compete with a memory, and Ethan never used grief as a wall. One evening, he admitted that he had avoided making new plans because plans had once been taken from him. Keeping the promise was not the problem, he said. Sometimes I used it as an excuse to keep the rest of life predictable. Claire understood. She had used responsibility in the same way. Work protected her from the uncertainty of needing anyone. Maybe we both became very good at surviving, she said, and forgot that surviving was supposed to lead somewhere. Neither of them named what was changing between them. They did not need to. Trust arrived first, which made every other possibility feel safer. Lily's application to the summer writing program became the first test of that trust. The essay asked applicants to describe a place that had shaped them. Lily wrote about Table 12, but her first draft made Hannah's death the center of every paragraph. Ethan praised the writing and avoided suggesting changes because the subject felt too personal. Claire asked a different question. If your mother could read this, what would she say you forgot? Lily considered it. She would say I made her sound sad. She was funny. She once convinced Dad that the restaurant had replaced apple pie with turnip pie for April Fool's Day. Ethan defended himself. The menu looked official. Lily rewrote the essay around the humor, habits, and community connected to the table. She did not erase loss, but she stopped allowing it to define the woman she remembered. The revision was stronger because it sounded like Lily rather than an adult's idea of grief. When the acceptance email arrived, Lily read it 3 times before screaming loudly enough for a neighbor to check the hallway. The program offered partial aid, but a remaining fee still had to be paid. Claire did not offer to cover it. Ethan used savings he had built for educational expenses. Lily contributed part of her consulting pay, and the program granted an additional need-based award after reviewing their application. Claire celebrated the result without becoming the solution to every difficulty. Her own personal test arrived when Richard suffered a minor fall at home. He was not seriously injured, but Claire discovered how little she knew about his daily life. For years, assistants had selected his birthday gifts and arranged their lunches. She canceled a meeting and spent the afternoon helping him reorganize the study where he kept family records. They found the original willow and pine ledger from its opening year. The restaurant had lost money for 7 consecutive months before neighborhood events brought it stability. Beside one difficult week, Claire's grandfather had written, "People return when they feel expected." Richard watched her read the sentence. "Your grandfather was terrible at slogans. This one is not terrible. No, this one kept us honest." Claire began calling her father without having an agenda. Some conversations lasted 5 minutes. Others lasted an hour. The change did not appear in the restaurant plan, yet it belonged to the same lesson. Remembering people required time that no efficiency system could manufacture. Then reopening day arrived, carrying one question no renovation report could answer. Would the neighborhood return after the curiosity faded? 3 hours before opening, the new reservation system stopped synchronizing and assigned several families to the same tables. The manager wanted to delay the event. Claire rejected both panic and denial. Staff printed the reservation list, called the affected guests, and converted the meeting room into temporary dining space. Ethan helped move chairs, but refused special treatment for Table 12. If another family needed the window during the first seating, he would wait. The conflict was resolved before the doors opened, but it exposed how fragile the new operation remained. Claire thanked the employees who had corrected the problem instead of blaming the young host who first noticed it. A restored building could attract a crowd. Only a trusted team could bring that crowd back. At 5:50, the final confirmation call ended. Every reservation had a place. Claire looked through the front window and saw families already gathering outside. The real test was no longer whether they would come. It was whether the restaurant could give them a reason to return. The grand reopening took place on a clear Friday evening in early autumn. Fresh flowers framed the entrance. The restored piano filled the dining room with an old country melody. Families whose photographs appeared on the history wall. Return to see them. Representatives from the shelter and nearby schools joined the celebration. For the first time in years, every table was reserved. Ethan entered with Lily at 6 o'clock and stopped beneath the doorway. The restaurant looked brighter, but it still felt familiar. Table 12 remained beside the window. The afternoon light touched the wood exactly where it always had. "Mom would recognize it," Lily said. Ethan nodded. "That was what I hoped." The manager invited Claire to speak before dinner. She wore a simple light blue dress rather than a business suit. Standing near the piano, she thanked the employees, craftspeople, community partners, and families who had trusted the restaurant with their celebrations. Then she looked toward Ethan. Several months ago, I came here to evaluate an underperforming business, she said. I met a father who taught me that a table can hold more than a meal. It can hold a promise, and a promise can continue serving people long after the person who inspired it is gone. That conversation did not make our business decision for us. It made us ask better questions. The answer showed us that willow and pine did not need to disappear. It needed the chance to become useful again. She explained the community partnerships and the one-year plan. She did not pretend the future was guaranteed. She told the room that preserving a place required people to keep choosing it. Reservations, community events, and donations had already exceeded the first quarter targets. Applause moved through the restaurant. Claire walked to table 12, carrying a small brass plaque. She placed it near the window, not in the center of the table where it might interrupt dinner. The engraving read, "The Promise Table," in honor of faithful love, meals shared, and the courage to begin again. Lily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Ethan ran his fingers across the words, then looked toward Hannah's photograph. "This table will remain here as long as Willow and Pine stands," Claire said. "Every Friday, the restaurant will also donate a chicken pot pie to the Hawthorne Shelter in Hannah's honor. Other guests can add a meal if they choose." Ethan tried to answer, but no words came. He looked around at the employees, families, and shelter volunteers. What had begun as a private promise between a frightened child and her grieving father had become an invitation for an entire community to remember someone through kindness. At last, he said, Hannah would have complained that everyone was making too much of a simple dinner. Then she would have ordered 10 more. Laughter broke through the tears in the room. When the applause faded, Ethan returned to table 12. The usual place setting waited across from him. He placed Hannah's photograph beside the plaque and stood in silence for a moment. Then he moved the photograph to the center of the table where everyone could see it. He did not remove the chair. He turned it slightly, making room for Claire beside Lily. "For 7 years, this place reminded us where love had been," Ethan said. "Tonight, it reminds me that love can honor yesterday without closing the door on tomorrow. Would you have dinner with us?" Claire looked at Lily, who was already pulling out the chair beside her. "We saved you a place," the girl said. Claire sat down. Ethan ordered his salmon. Lily chose the grilled chicken. Claire ordered the soup she had eaten on the first night. A chicken pot pie was placed in a donation box for the shelter, and guests throughout the dining room began adding meals of their own. As evening settled across the window, Ethan told stories about Hannah that made Claire laugh. Lily read the message confirming that she had been accepted into the summer writing program. Claire turned off her telephone before it could interrupt. No one made a speech about healing. No one suggested the past had been replaced. The photograph remained among them, not as a barrier, but as part of the family story that had brought them to this moment. After closing, Ethan helped the staff carry donation boxes to the shelter van. Claire changed from dress shoes into a spare pair kept in her office and joined him. Lily recorded the number of meals while the kitchen supervisor checked temperatures and labels. The process was ordinary, organized, and more meaningful than the applause had been. Claire understood that a promise survived through routines people were willing to repeat after the celebration ended. Ethan understood that accepting help had not weakened his devotion to Hannah. It had allowed the devotion to serve farther than he could have carried it alone. Before they left, Claire asked whether he wanted the brass plaque polished every week. Ethan looked at the fingerprints already marking its surface. "No," he said. "Let it look touched." Months later, Willow and Pine reached its annual target ahead of schedule. The community dinners filled slow weekday evenings. The shelter partnership expanded to 3 other restaurants. Employees began collecting customer stories that no financial report had ever captured. Claire still studied revenue and costs, but she also learned to ask what a decision protected, whom it served, and what people might remember after the numbers were forgotten. Ethan continued arriving every Friday at 6 o'clock. Some weeks Lily joined him. Some weeks Claire arrived first and waited for him. Hannah's photograph always stood near the window, and a meal always went to the shelter. The promise did not disappear when new happiness entered his life. It grew large enough to include it. People passing the window sometimes noticed the three of them laughing at table 12 and wondered what had brought them together. They could not see the 7 years of quiet devotion, the difficult boardroom decision, or the meal traveling across town to someone who needed it. They saw only a family sharing dinner beneath the golden evening light. Perhaps that was enough. Every stranger carries a story we may never know. Every empty chair may hold more than absence. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not that someone returns from yesterday, but that kindness gives tomorrow a place to sit.